Full reaction to Washington beating Texas. They almost didn't.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view post-crazy college football viewing. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights-free but Pac-2 dominated and still technically national championship bound and beloved Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review. Please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is wrapping up, but guess what? You can make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Here's something that is actually crazy. Texas had 3 chances from like the 12-yard line to win that football game. That's crazy for a couple reasons. Number one, Washington had the ball kind of close to midfield with less than a minute to play, and Texas had no timeouts. And number two, Washington outplayed Texas from the jump. Remember, Texas never led in this game. Washington began the game with a defensive stop and then promptly going down the field in the easiest of fashion from a Michael Penix dime to score a touchdown. Texas tied the game a couple times, but Washington had a double-digit lead. Texas made it interesting at the end. Texas made it really interesting at the end. But Washington was just better. Washington was just better than Texas. And they're going to play Michigan in the national championship. And there's something poetic about the first 4-team playoff being Big Ten against Pac-12 and the last 4-team playoff being Big Ten against Pac-12. And the 2 teams that are going to play on Monday are the arch rivals of the teams that played 9 years ago. College football. You can't make it up. You also can't make up this Pac-12 After Dark special. I mean, you talk about the college football gods delivering one final Pac-12 After Dark masterpiece. How could you have drawn that up? Everything that just transpired in the final 60 seconds of game time in that game is absolutely crazy. And I'm going to talk about Washington first, and then I'm going to talk about coaching decisions, because there were a couple on both sides that had me doing that. For those listening, I was scratching my head. Michael Penix was unbelievable. I mean, the guy finished second in the Heisman voting. Boy, he looked like he should have been first. He finished second team all Pac-12. Boy, he looked like he should have been first. Now, that of course, has plenty of recency bias into it, and you can look at the stats throughout the season and say, well, so-and-so had better numbers. Yeah, you can. But if you're talking about eye test and big game performance, Michael Penix looks like the best player in college football right now, because he looked good from the moment that offense took the field. He and Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer, their symmetry and cohesion week in and week out is so impressive. It is so impressive. Penix knows exactly where he's supposed to go with the football, when it's supposed to be there. His accuracy is unlike anything I've seen. More coming on that later in the show. But I wanted to talk about this Washington coaching staff, because Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb is his offensive coordinator. They've won 21 consecutive games. They've won 10 games in a row by 10 points or less, which is bonkers. And this game played out almost exactly how I predicted it would. Both teams score in the 30s. It's a one-possession game. Washington doesn't lose those. Here we are. Washington won another one-possession game. Stop me if you've heard this one before. The key play late in the game was Penix to a Dunze. That beautiful throw down the sideline that set up the field goal to make it a 2-possession game. Yeah, that stuff has been happening all throughout the year. And I just think that Washington played really, really well. And my only question, and again, I picked Washington to win the game, and I haven't made a thought about what I think they could do against Michigan, because that's an interesting matchup for different reasons than this one was against Texas. The reason I felt Washington, or the only question I had about Washington rather, was they've played their best football games of the year against Oregon. That's a rivalry game. Can they do that against other people? Because they just hadn't done that. They didn't play their best against Utah. They gave up 28 points in the first half to Bryson Barnes, played better in the second half. They played horribly on offense. Granted, the flu was a part of it. Still did not play well against Arizona State. Against Washington State, I think they were pretty darn close to healthy, and the Cougs almost came into Seattle and beat them. I mean, it was a team that was getting up for Oregon and nobody else, but they got up for this game. They were ready from the jump. And that's something that I think is a hallmark of Kalen DeBoer teams. They're always ready to go. They are well coached and they are ready to play. Their game plans and their execution are just so good across the board. How did Texas look coming out in this game? They kept having procedural penalties on both sides of the ball. How did Washington look? Business as usual. Snap the ball to Michael Penix, protect him with the best offensive line in college football, and throw it all over the field. That's how Washington looked. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is about to get a huge contract extension. They might be waiting to figure out how much he's going to make depending on what happens in the national championship game on Monday. But this is just the second time ever that a Pac-12 team has won a college football playoff game. Oregon won the first. Washington wins this one. Washington's the only Pac-12 team to have gone to the 14 playoff twice. I fully expect Washington and Oregon both to go into the Big Ten and be really good teams and compete right there at the top. By the way, no matter what happens, it's going to be a fun matchup in, I think it's September or October, when Michigan goes to Seattle next year in a national championship game rematch. But the job that Kalen DeBoer has done, what he and Ryan Grubb have done with Michael Penix has been nothing short of remarkable. And I mean, that guy is just so fantastically good. But I want to talk about coaches for just another moment before I give Penix his props, because he absolutely deserves them. So Kalen DeBoer and Steve Sarkisian, both really good coaches. I think DeBoer is better. It's one of the reasons I thought they'd win the game. Lo and behold, here we are. This is just proof positive that really good coaches can make really boneheaded decisions. It happens all the time. There are so many things that coaches are in charge of, so many different things they're managing. They can have bad moments, sequences, play calls, all this sort of stuff. And I think fans oftentimes get frustrated with coaches when they do this, that, or the other thing. But these are two great coaches. Steve Sarkisian has got all the pressure in the world on him coming into his third year at Texas when he hasn't won more than 8 games yet. And he comes in and goes 12-1. Dominates the Big 12 championship game, goes to the playoff. Guy's a good coach, and he's a great play caller. And he had a dud of a play call on 1st and goal with 12 seconds to go in the game. He's calling a fake toss, double wheel up the sideline. Like Washington's going to think you might swing it to a running back out of the backfield, and then Ewers ends up throwing it to the running back. And he gets out of bounds and stops the clock, or else the game runs out. That was a gift to Washington's defense right there. And then the DB, I apologize, I forgot his name, who made the play on the 4th and goal throw. A couple of poor throws from Quinn Ewers that didn't really give his receivers a great chance. The last one was okay. That was a heck of a play. He just jumped up in the air, didn't really touch Mitchell, and then just swatted the ball away like he was not going to fly out of the air in your cabin kitchen because he's buzzing around causing a havoc and whatnot. But that was, objectively speaking, a boneheaded play call from Steve Sarkisian. And then Kalen DeBoer on the other side could have taken a knee on 3rd down and punted it back to Texas with only about 15 seconds left. Instead, they hand it off. Unfortunately, Dylan Johnson gets hurt, and the ghost of Mario Cristobal has somehow made its way into the Sugar Bowl. And DeBoer, as we know, is a great coach, one of the best in all of college football. So I just had that thought watching these two great coaches make those mistakes. It reminded me of Jonathan Smith, a great coach, going with the double fake field goal after the procedure penalty against Arizona to Atticus Sappington. It's like, dude, how did you think that was the right thing to do? So, a couple of great coaches that made those mistakes, and it just stood out to me, but it didn't end up mattering for Washington in the end. Their fans survived. I'm sure a number of heart attacks. I bet Roman over at Locked On Huskies is trying to bring down his pulse at the moment. I imagine that's not an easy thing to do. But Michael Penix, that guy's pulse never goes up or down. He just stays steady Eddie all throughout the game. FanDuel had Washington at one point in time as a 4.5-point underdog. Some people on this particular show came in here and said, hey, you should take Washington and the points there. If you had done so, you would have made a little money tonight, because this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is wrapping up too, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Any $5 bet, that's $150 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. It's all waiting for you there over at FanDuel. The app is super easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet. You can do same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can do over-unders. You can do spreads. You can do everything you want. There's a parlay hub to find popular parlays as well, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Okay, so as I'm recording the show, I just got a text from Roman of Locked On Huskies. It says, there are about 12 H's in there. That's how he's feeling right now, and I imagine he should be. And part of the reason he is feeling that is because Michael Penix, oh my gosh, that guy is so good. I'll be completely transparent here. Before the season, I saw a take from, I forget who it was, but it was a Washington alum and former player. I think it might have been Jordan Reffett, and he tweeted out, this Washington team reminds me of 2019 LSU. Great quarterback and 3 NFL receivers. And I thought, hey, stylistically I see it, but I think we got to, pump the brakes on anything compared to 2019 LSU. I still think that to an extent, because 2019 LSU, for my money, is the best college football team we have ever seen. I seriously would put them on the field against anybody. Washington in that game, when they are at their peak like that, they're the closest thing to that 2019 LSU offense that we have seen. The accuracy of Michael Penix's deep ball honestly doesn't make sense. It is reminiscent of earlier this morning, because I'm a diehard. I was playing NCAA 14 Revamped, a fantastic football game. NCAA 14, but modified thanks to some wonderful people out there in the internet world to improve and enhance some features of the game. So until the next NCAA football video game comes out, that's what I play to get my college football video game fix, and I have for several years. And when you play that game, one of the, shall we say, drawbacks of it, unless you adjust the sliders manually, is that your quarterbacks, even if they're backup quarterbacks, but especially when they're starters and really good, are going to throw accurate passes almost every single time. And that's what Michael Penix is out there, because he's not just hitting these deep shots all the time. The way that he places the ball just right in his guy's hands, so he never has to break stride, so it's in the perfect spot every single time. I have not seen anybody do that since Joe Burrow. And I think Penix is not at his best when he's outside the pocket, but he can do that every now and then, and had a couple of nice plays on the move in this game. There was a zipper he had earlier in the game, I think first or second quarter. Roma Dunze rolled to his right, set his hips, turned back, and fired it over the middle. It was a really good throw, but he throws perhaps the most catchable ball in all of college football. I don't know that there's a quarterback who consistently puts the ball with the exact right amount of touch, power, accuracy, and location and timing as Michael Penix. And one thing that goes overlooked with him, because Washington does a lot of pre-snap movement and shifting around, it's one of the reasons Ryan Grubb is really, really good as an offensive coordinator, is Penix's ability to dissect a defense and recognize what they're doing before the ball is snapped allows him to operate with perfect timing. Because on that long throw late in the fourth quarter to Odunze, for example, setting up the field goal that made it a 2-possession game, he knew before the ball was snapped, I'm going to have a one-on-one here with Odunze, and that's where I'm going. And so he knows I'm going to take this snap, turn my hips, drop, hit my back foot, and throw the ball, and it's going to be right there for Roma Dunze. And of course, there it was, because that's how it's been all season long. But the way that he operates within that offense is so ridiculously effective, efficient, and explosive. He started the game 6 of 8 for 190 yards passing. That's unconscionable. And here's the other thing, that depending on where he lands in the NFL, he's going to have to deal with as somewhat of a challenge. His receiving core could be worse in the NFL next year. That is a possibility. That could happen because Odunze, McMillan, Polk, it doesn't get better than that. At one point during the broadcast, and I know that Washington fans understand this has been kind of a regular thing for them over the last 2 years. During the broadcast, at one point in time, it was clear that Greg McElroy I think Greg McElroy is great as an analyst, but he was still kind of in the camp of, well, what's the better receiving trio? Is it Texas or is it Washington? And then he realized kind of midway through the game, boy, Washington's, their receiving trio is outplaying Texas's. And it's like, yeah, did you expect something else to happen? I'm not trying to, throw shade at Adonai Mitchell or Xavier Worthy or Jordan Whittington, but we're not putting if you were putting them in the same class and saying this trio at Texas could be as good or better than this trio at Washington, you haven't been paying attention, at least not enough. But those of us out west who have watched Washington all year know full well that those guys are ridiculously good. And the way they play with Penix, it is just the perfect marriage for an offense that wants to push the ball down the field. And Michael Penix finished second team All Pac-12, and he finished second in the Heisman voting. And he won not the Campbell Award, but the non-Heisman Award given to the best overall player to college in college football, which is kind of a weird designation to have. But he was the first guy to win that award, but not win the Heisman since Tua in 2018. I remember watching Tua in college, and I've watched a lot of Michael Penix. I am much higher on Michael Penix, 1,000%. I would take Penix over Tua. And I think Tua is capable and good, but you're going to hear those comparisons in the coming months, years, weeks, whatever, for the NFL draft. You're going to hear all of that get discussed. Michael Penix is better. He's a more consistent, even more precise somehow. Tua can make some really accurate, precise throws. But, man, when Penix is there, and he obviously wasn't healthy for a stretch of the season, you watch him now and watch when he had that stretch where statistically he lost the Heisman to Jaden Daniels in the eyes of the rest of the college football world. How foolish do those guys feel right now? No, I think it was Jaden Daniels. What was Jaden Daniels play? Oh, he wasn't playing in his bowl game because it wasn't, worthy of playing in for a guy who could make the NFL. Penix's was, and he went out and had the second highest passing yardage total in the history of the Sugar Bowl. Second only to Joe Burrow, who went for 495, I think was the number they put up on the broadcast, which, going back to the point I made earlier, like, this Washington offense is the closest thing we have seen to 2019 LSU since that team won the national championship now 4 years ago. I don't think they're quite there, but boy, they are really darn close. They are probably about 90% of what that team had, which was Joe Burrow, and he had Justin Jefferson, and he had Jamar Chase, and he had Terrence Marshall. Those guys are all on NFL rosters. Two of them are two of the five best receivers in the NFL. Odunze could be one of the five best receivers in the NFL. That guy is just ridiculously good. I hope he finds a spot with a good quarterback because he's got one now in college. But Penix, man, you just could not have played a better football game. And I thought that from the moment the game kicked off, it looked like Washington was the better team. But sometimes that can kind of stabilize, and Texas was fighting and whatnot. But, unlike in the Pac-12 championship game, Washington didn't trail the entire game. And it would have been bizarre, to say the least, to see Washington give that game away at the very end, because, as I said, they were the better team. Vegas didn't think so. Vegas clearly has no idea what they're doing with Washington. They clearly don't know. They opened as a 5-point underdog against Michigan. I'm telling you, money to be made. It's sitting right there for you. Go ahead and take it. Michigan could win the game. Michigan could win by 5 or more points. All right. Yeah. Good luck with that. Good luck with that one. But I'm sure all the Texas fans who were in my comments when I picked Washington ahead of this matchup in the last few weeks and were telling me how wrong I was and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure those fans will come and apologize, as is often the case in the YouTube comment section. That's how it usually goes, is people come in here and flame me for a particular take, and then when I'm right, they come in and they send me deep, heartfelt apologies. That doesn't happen, but that's okay. I understand how the game works. It's all good. By the way, how is the Pac-12 done? Serious question. I mean, I know the answer to the question, but just aesthetically, it doesn't make any tangible sense. It doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. This is a conference that just put 2 Heisman finalists in a year following a season in which the Heisman winner came out of this conference. They've got a team playing for the national championship. I mean, goodness gracious. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. You could have the national champion be in a different conference next year because the one they were playing in blew up. It's crazy. It's crazy. And it's, as everydayers are aware, it makes me sad that the conference is coming to a close because I grew up watching this conference. I love the teams. I love the matchups. I love the history, everything. And I hate throwing that away just for television dollars. It is an absolute positive waste of a concept, all this realignment and whatnot. And it just keeps getting more ridiculous. And I mentioned this earlier, it bears repeating. It is poetic. There are 2 things that are pretty poetic about this game playing out as it did. Number 1, Pac-12 after dark, undefeated, baby. It just delivered. Right when you thought it was going to be boring, Washington had it. Nope, they didn't kneel down. They didn't learn from Mario Cristobal either, and they injured their running back and then punted, and then, boy, did that get exciting really, really fast. And so that happened first. That was the first poetic thing. But the second thing, I can't get over. It was Ohio State and Oregon to start this 14 playoff, and now it's Michigan and Washington to end it. It's purely coincidental, or is it rigged? Is it rigged like the NFL? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Take your tinfoil hats off, everybody. Relax. Calm down. It's a joke. It's a joke. There's a great line from Craig Ferguson, a very funny comedian, and which he says, "It's a bleeping joke." It was a joke. Okay. So that just all kind of made me think about the Pac-12 not existing next year. And the sad part about it to me is I think, in many ways, the Pac-12 did it to itself. The presidents, the poor leadership, the bad decisions, the commissioners, everything like that. But part of the reason that West Coast football often didn't get the respect that it sometimes deserved is because sometimes, and I agree with this take, it didn't always deserve it. And it felt like investment wasn't always there, or that not everyone cared the same way they care in other parts of the country, and that coaching hires reflected that, or, the passion around particular programs didn't always reflect what needed to happen for West Coast football to compete at a national level. But now in consecutive years, the Pac-12 has shown itself capable of putting a team in the 14 playoff. It has shown itself 100% capable of that. USC was within a game of doing it last year. Washington and Oregon, both could have gotten in this year. Obviously, Washington did. So right as there is this ascension, right? Oregon stayed at a high level for a long time. Washington fell down very briefly in 2021 and got back up. But they were kind of down for a while. But then Chris Peterson brought them back up. And then USC was down. And Lincoln Riley, I have likened him to Anakin Skywalker because, USC more broadly is Anakin Skywalker. There is no perfect comparison. You cannot find a better comparison because when Lincoln Riley came over, it was okay. USC is nationally relevant again. The Pac-12 is going to generate more interest because USC gets a lot of ratings, gets a lot of eyeballs, and is a big brand. That's going to be the savior of West Coast football. And instead, USC helped orchestrate the downfall of the Pac-12. I mean, There's never been a greater physical, literal manifestation of Anakin Skywalker than USC. But think about everything that this conference should have been able to be and will never get the chance to do. Lincoln Riley at USC off of an 8-5 year, and they hire UCLA's defensive coordinator from across town after they lose to him. Yeah, that's interesting, to say the least. Washington and Oregon can't do anything except play a 3-point game, and both of them are clearly good enough to play at a national level. You look at the way Oregon played Washington twice this year, I was more impressed with them in those two games than I was with Texas in this particular game. I know Texas had a chance at the end, and it was pretty fluky. It was pretty darn fluky, and I think that, Washington played better the second time than they did the first time, but my point still stands here, right? Everyone was asking, why is Oregon ranked ahead of Texas? Well, maybe the College Football Playoff Committee knew something, because when you watch that game, I felt Washington was better from the jump, whereas, and by the way, Texas never led in the game, whereas Oregon held fourth quarter leads in both of the games against Washington. I think that for the Ducks, they were really, really good, and Washington's just better. So you've got a big brand in USC, a big brand in Oregon. You've got, I think, an ascending national brand, but still a pretty large brand in Washington. They don't have all the, flash or national appeal or, always get the respect that an Oregon or a USC would. That much has been evident, where you're looking at spreading lines, media attention, Heisman voting, whatever you want to talk about there. Washington then, with Kalen DeBoer, has done nothing but win, 21 consecutive football games, might be up to 22. I've lost track at this point. So they've been so good. And then you have Deion Sanders in the mix. All of this could have been in the same conference. Deion Sanders there, Steady Eddie, Kyle Whittingham at Utah with Cam Rising coming back. If the Pac-12 stays together, Jonathan Smith probably stays at Oregon State. I mean, this conference was building itself. It was on the way. The right hires had been made. Colorado needed attention and relevance. They got it with Deion. USC needed a real football coach. They got it with Lincoln Riley. Oregon needed to replace Mario Cristobal. They upgraded. Washington needed to find a guy who knew how to win football games. They got him. Oregon State needed a guy that fit their culture perfectly. They got him. Heck, Arizona State. Look at Arizona, Jed Fish. I mean, this conference blowing up is absolute insanity. It's absolute insanity, and it's just such a shame. Think about, I was just laying them out, but let me go team by team here. You should have had Lincoln Riley at USC, Chip Kelly trying to hang on at UCLA, Dan Lanning trying to beat Kalen DeBoer at Washington, who might be coming off a national championship season, depending on what happens on Monday. Jake Dickert at Washington State, who I think is a great fit up there in Pullman. You should have Jonathan Smith still at Oregon State, and the Bees building themselves into something they haven't been before. Deion Sanders at Colorado, which makes him a great villain for the conference at the very least, because a lot of people hate him. A lot of people love him. Guess what? People feel that way about Nick Saban too. Kyle Whittingham at Utah. Well, he's Kyle Whittingham. Jed Fish building a really good team at Arizona. Kenny Dillingham bringing actual energy and passion to Arizona State and Tempe. Justin Wilcox at Cal, that, can surprise people every now and then, but, wouldn't have been the most exciting team going forward. And I think Troy Taylor can do a good job at Stanford. That's what the league should be going into 2024. And instead it's dead. It's done for all intents and purposes. I mean, absolute insanity. Yeah, I mean, you'd have big brands, you'd have big names, big coaches, big players. Oh, gosh. What utter ridiculousness. Oh, such ridiculousness. But regardless, congrats to Washington. They have absolutely earned the right to be in the national championship game. Penix is a stud. DeBoer is amazing as a coach. And I tell you what, he wins on Monday. He's going to get a lot of money. He's going to get a lot of money no matter what. But you win the national championship game, it's probably going to worth a little bit of cheddar, as it should be. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.